Hello and welcome to Button Pushers. I'm Ben,
And I'm Meg.
and today we're talking about digital post-processing techniques. We're going to be chopping these up into a couple of different discussions, but today we're starting with just some basics about window and leveling.
Perfect. So let's talk about windowing and leveling. You guys have all done this, right? We take an x-ray and then it doesn't look quite right. So we kind of change the way it appears, right? Makes it a little bit brighter, darker. Maybe we want more grays and less grays. What we're doing is we are post-processing, right? The image has already been processed. We had a certain technique and it showed up on the computer a certain way. But we can now post-process, we can change the way it looks on the monitor by doing things like windowing and leveling. There's a bunch of other things that we can do too. We are going to stick to some simple topics today with the windowing and leveling. But we first have to break down what each of these are. So we're going to talk about each of these. Before we even get started, contrast, right? What is contrast? Contrast is the difference between adjacent IR exposures, right? Back in the day, I learned on film. Ben, I'm sure you learned back on film too. It wasn't IR exposures, then it was density. If you say density now, you get a slap on your wrist. You're supposed to say IR exposure. So it's the difference between adjacent IR exposures. When we are changing our picture, when we are changing our contrast, what we are actually changing in is our window width, WW, right? And what we're actually changing is whether it's a high contrast or a low contrast picture. When we were changing our brightness back in the day, that was known as density. We would be changing the brightness of the picture. We'd be changing it by mostly looking at our mass. Now what, instead of having to depend purely on mass to change our density or our brightness, we can play with our window level. And that's going to be changing the brightness of the picture.
Yeah, and I feel like we do this all the time, like on Instagram and stuff. Like even now, like I can mess with the way that my image looks on here, and we're always like messing with, the way that different things display. So nothing's changed about the room that I'm in. I'm just messing with the way that it's being filtered by the computer, which is exactly what we're doing with the X-ray images. We're not changing anything about the actual image. We're just changing the way it's being displayed on the computer.
Perfect point. I have a picture of like the slider light switch on there too.
Oh yeah.
Because that's how I think of like leveling. Leveling is literally turning up the brightness of the picture or bringing it all the way down. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good way to think about it. When we're leveling, we're turning up. That one's the easiest one, I feel like, to understand. We're either making the room brighter or darker. Contrast is the weirder one because it's like I always think about, like, I'm kind of a pale guy, but like I'm wearing a black sweatshirt and like there's a high contrast between
high contrast
and my black sweatshirt. I'm a high contrast individual.
That works.
Yeah.
I have some pictures here of high versus low contrast to kind of help people out, right? So for high contrast, thinking of something like a zebra, right? Beautiful animals, black, white, that's it. Just like you, Ben, I am drawn to high contrast. I notice that I wear a lot of black and white. I don't feel like I need any more black t-shirts, and yet I keep buying more and more black t-shirts. I don't know what's up with that.
They don't show spaghetti stains. That's the thing about it. You wear the same shirt for a month and no one knows.
My dog's black hairs, you don't see those everywhere.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep, this is it.
Yeah, okay, and so that's kind of like a hand x-ray, right?
Yep,
you've got the bone or you've got soft tissue, and that's it.
There's no organs. It's just black, white, a little bit of gray. Boom, we're done. However, if you look at our low scale low contrast, long scale, you look at that cute little koala bear, do you notice all of the detail that you can see inside of that koala? All of the little gray fur and hair and stuff? The ability to have more grays is actually providing more information. So even though you and I are both drawn to that black and white zebra being very attractive, the black and the white high contrast, we technically have more information in lots of grays. So especially with digital receptors, going into that long scale and having more grays is actually going to be more information on the computer and a better image for especially our digital stuff. And I have a picture of an abdomen here. So abdomen has all the anatomy in it, right? All of the things. And it's going to cause a lot of different attenuation numbers. Therefore, we're going to have a lot of different gray scales that are going to be visible, right? So an abdomen is going to be long scale, where a hand is going to be short scale.
Mhm.
And before I go too much further, so I always show this picture to my brand new students, because there's something weird going on with that abdomen. And I know, Ben, you probably immediately zeroed in on it, right?
Yeah, I saw it. This is Sigourney Weaver in the movie Alien, right? Like she's got the alien inside of her, and it's about to bust out. No, I think this patient's pregnant, right?
They are, yeah.
Yeah.
So you notice the little coil, their spine, and then
Yes,
you
very
see the
pregnant.
little
Like I'd say third
arms and
third
legs.
trimester. Yeah.
Yeah. Little chicken wings going on in there. Yeah.
Yeah, we used to even do these, not to go too much down the digression, but we used to do these pelvimetry exams like back in the day where they'd actually do x-ray measurements of the pelvis to see whether or not they could do natural birth.
I remember
One
hearing
thing,
about that.
yeah, I saw it in the
Crazy idea.
ASRT recently. One thing I noticed, like, okay, so one of the things I've always learned about contrast is like it's long, low, lots, like long scale, low contrast, lots of gray. But the
Yeah.
thing that I noticed, Meg, with these two pictures is the koala bear is cuter. Like low contrast is cuter, right? Versus the zebra looks kind of serious and mysterious or something. The
They
koala
are.
is just cute.
Yeah.
So yeah, when we're looking at something like an abdomen, in this case, we've got liver, kidneys, and then baby. There's going to be all these, like you're saying, all these different attenuation values. So we're going to have this long scale of contrast. So what do? We drop the KVP, to basically shorten the scale.
Yep.
That's one of the hardest things to wrap my mind around, though.
So now we're not really KVP dependent anymore, right? On film, when I took an X-ray at 50 KVP versus 80 KVP, oh my gosh, you could tell the difference, right? And what you took is what you got. Now I can take an X-ray at like a varying amount of KVPs. We have a huge dynamic range with digital, but I can change my scale of contrast based on window width. And what I'm doing, I think of like shutters here, right? And when you have your shutters closed, like this first picture, you notice that you can only see certain amount of colors, right? If it was a black and white image, it would be black and white image. This would be very high contrast, right? I can see the lawn, I can see one tree, I can see a little bit of the street, some rocks. I'm not seeing a huge variety, right? So that would be a high contrast image with very narrow window width. When I open up the shutters, now I'm opening up my window width. You're moving your mouse to the left or the right, right? You're going to be opening up your scale of contrast. Now I'm going to have a very wide scale of contrast. Now I'm going to have that long scale of contrast. So I'm opening it up and now I can see, like, I don't know why there's a power drill in that picture and a plotter and I don't know, some mailboxes and stuff like that. You're seeing a whole bunch more shades that are available on this picture than there were on the original picture. So you're opening it up and seeing a whole bunch more.
Yeah, I like that picture with the slope at the bottom because I feel like, that steeper slope, higher contrast. And if it's if it's a shallower slope, lower contrast. That's a great image. I think that helps.
So it's each of those like pixel value, there's way more pixel values on the wide, right? The long scale. The short one has a very narrow pixel values. There's only X amount of pixel values. The longer scale has way more pixel values available, way more shades of gray available.
Yeah, I can see that. And the way that works for us as X-ray techs is basically, do we want to accentuate the difference between two adjacent pixels? Do we want to kind of increase the amount of contrast between adjacent pixels in order to see the anatomy of interest, or do we want to decrease it because what we're seeing is a little bit more subtle? And one of the things that I think students kind of struggle to wrap our minds around with this is like, well, why would I change the picture, right? And it's really, again, the answer is always what are we trying to look at? It's all about what are we trying to see. So if I need to see, for example, with the one on the left, if I need that high contrast in order to really appreciate what's happening with the rocks at the base of the picture, if I need that fine detail, then yeah, high contrast is going to help, like to look at bones and things like that. If I'm looking at more kind of like you're saying, big picture, and I want to evaluate, where the tree is in relationship to the lawn and stuff like that, then that low contrast is going to help.
Yeah,
These are great
absolutely.
pictures.
So when we are changing our window width, what are we really doing, right? We're not magically making new information appear. What we're doing is we're basically kind of like reassigning what colors are available. So like when we have short scale, maybe all of the values between 1 and 4, and these are totally made up numbers, like this is not full line at all. This is just, I took a picture, let's say there's 10 values that are available.
Yeah.
The 1 through 4, 3.9 are all going to come up as white. 4 through 5.9 are all going to come up as light gray. And then we have dark gray from 6 to 7.9, and then black is 8 to 10. Basically what I'm saying is I have 4 shades available, but I have 10 shades that I need. So it's, or 10 values. So I'm going to just combine a whole bunch of them. So you see that that is a very high contrast image, right? When I do long scale and I'm adjusting my window width, now I can actually assign those different values an actual different shade. So now only like 1 is going to be super white, 2 is going to be like a very light gray, 3 is the medium light gray, and it just keeps progressing. So now it's a much longer scale. So you see that that long scale picture has a variety of different shades of gray going on in it. Technically, it would have more information.
Yeah, this is great. I like this illustration a lot. Yeah, nothing again has changed with the attenuation values. So if these little numbers represent what the attenuation value was for a given area of interest or volume, nothing's changed with those. All that's changed is the way that we're assigning colors to them. And I mean, I guess in my heart of hearts, I will always be a CT tech.
I thought Hounsfield units too.
Yeah. And so for me, like in the world of CT, I just think, oh, picture on the left is what I'm looking at bone. That's a bone window. And picture on the right is soft tissue. As an X-ray tech, the way you might think about it is like picture on the left is going to be helpful for looking at extremities and things like that. Picture on the right is more like chest and abdomen stuff.
Perfect.
So here's an example of kind of that just on display. So picture on the left right now, I have a higher contrast image of the lungs, and you can just kind of see certain things stand out more on it than picture on the right is a more of a low contrast image. There's more shades of gray. There's more gradations of gray between adjacent structures. And so if we're looking, for example, it looks like maybe a PICC line or some kind of peripheral coiled up in the patient's axillary something or other over here. I can't tell for sure what's going on right there. And I'm not a physician, but basically it to me is more apparent on the high contrast image. But there's other things that stand out on the low contrast image. So if I'm looking to evaluate, like if there's a fluid level or something in the heart, I may need to use the low contrast window level to see that. So again, it's completely dependent on the pathology that we're looking at. Nothing has changed about the actual attenuation values. These are the same images. They're just being displayed differently.
Okay, so we talked about window width, right? WW. Now we got to talk about window level. And this is the more, I think this one's easier to understand. This is just playing with the brightness of the image, right? So now I'm picturing, we had shutters before, now I'm picturing blinds. If I open up my blinds a little bit, I'm going to have just a little bit of brightness coming in. It's going to be a pretty dark image. If I open it a little bit more and only allow 50% of the light to come in kind of a thing, I'm going to get a little bit brighter image. And then if I open it even more, obviously I'm going to have like the brightest image. It's going to be super bright. And I'm not going to say white because it doesn't go white. We're not changing the colors. What we're changing is how intense it basically looks. So you'll see on the chart at the bottom with the actual pixel values again, what we're really changing is I have like, I attempted to make the same angle on all of them, right? The difference is where the centering point is. So the centering point has gone up on each of those to the point where like that last one, the leveling centering point is at like a much higher center point than it was on that first one.
You made these illustrations yourself?
Well, they are very poorly made. If you move one thing on the slide, everything's going to get messed up.
They're
So,
really good. Oh my goodness. That's really
super
great.
tech
Yeah,
challenge.
no, kudos to you. Um, yeah, again, I hate to go back to CT language, but when I think about level, I think about like this is basically a centering point. And I like the way that you put the little line on it. It's basically just saying, okay, I'm looking for a pulmonary embolism, for example. So I want kind of the central point to be around 60 Hounsfield units because I know that that's roughly the attenuation value for a blood clot. And so I'm telling the machine this is what I want displayed. Kind of this is the center point. I don't want it less than that because that would be something air or fat or something like that. In the world of X-ray, we can kind of do a similar thing where it's like I'm mostly interested in bone right now, so I want the attenuation values that are mostly related to bone to be kind of what is controlling the brightness of the image. Yeah, I like the Venetian blind. Oh, this is good.
Yeah, so same concept, right? Where is your centering point for leveling? So
Yeah.
when you have a very dark image, you see how this isn't like, it's not going like white. What I'm doing is I'm just intensifying the brightness, right? And what you're
Yeah.
actually doing is changing your scale where the centering point is of your scale. So on the very dark image, the centering point is on the very low end. It's like somewhere between 8 and 9 kind of a thing. On the high end, we move it and it's like way up between like the 2 and the 3. So what you're really doing is you're taking the same window width. You see the square is the same window width. All I've done is changed where I'm centering it at.
That's a really
Again,
interesting point. Yeah, nothing's changed with the contrast of the image, so to speak, just where the contrast is being applied has changed. So for example, the one on the left, it's like we're looking more at the intensity level of like the trachea, you know? Like I feel like the trachea stands out more
good point.
versus the one on the right, we're looking more at like the bronchioles and things like that. They just seem to stand out more. But the contrast is the same between the bronchioles and the surrounding lung tissue or the trachea and the surrounding soft bone and soft tissue.
Yeah, great point. So quick question for you, Ben. What do you think about, like, I know that this is a controversial thing. A lot of people will play with window width and window level, but they might send the image after it's been post-processed to PACS so the radiologist can read it and it's already been adjusted. So like maybe it had that high brightness and now they've brought it down to a really dark window level. What happens when we do that? Can you talk about that?
Oh, we're going into a legal area at some point, and there's an ethical consideration there too. And not to get too far down into the weeds of that, but I would say just send what you got. So revert back to don't send any of your changes to window width or level as a technologist. Send what you got. I remember when we first got a photosimilar phosphor system in our hospital, and techs were like windowing and leveling pictures and then sending those to PACS, and it became an issue because I think at one point something was windowed out and the radiologist wasn't sure how to see what they needed to see. It could potentially degrade the quality of the image too. I know that's kind of more of a technological thing, but basically just send what you've got and let the radiologist make the final determination on how the image is to best be displayed. Don't give room for the lawyers to come in and question why you're doing what you're doing.
I mean, I definitely window width and level all the time. Like if I'm looking for, make sure I have like the apices of the lungs or the, cross-crank angles or something, you can window and level and double check that information, but you should always revert back to the original or else the radiologist gets this super bright image and then they are limited in where they can go.
That's a good point. The other thing that, we don't think about sometimes is what's the monitor that it's being displayed on. So we've got our rinky-dink monitors in the department, and the radiologists have their like Ferrari, Maserati, Bentley monitors in the reading room. They've got much nicer monitors than we do. And so, a little tiny adjustment in our world looks like some massive change in their world. In fact, with CT, we window and level all day long, and the machine knows that, so it just doesn't save any of our changes. It's just like
Smart.
stupid text. We're not saving any of your, we'll send it with the way we got it, you know? But yeah, we're constantly, you need it, and it's a great tool. And I think as a student, play with it, you know, learn it and get comfortable with it. It's a lot of fun. But just don't send those along.
Yeah. Keep in mind too, briefly talking about it without getting too into the weeds with it, right? We have all kinds of noise going around with us, right? We're looking at these monitors, and yeah, we're X-ray techs, we're like working in the dark, but it is not, you know, the radiologist like dungeon cave that they're staying in, right? Like they have no white light in that room at all. They're literally just looking at the computer monitor and a cave of darkness. So all of that white light around us, and you know, everything that's in our tech area, all that light is considered noise, which is affecting how we view this image. So we make it brighter, and now it's like blaring at the radiologist when they get it. So we want to leave it as is. Trust me, it's the computer took it a certain way for a certain reason. That is the ideal image, and it will go across to the radiologist just fine. We don't need to window and level and mess with it.
Good point.
Yeah. Awesome.
Well,
I feel like
was that it for today?
Yeah, we could talk a lot more about other kinds of post-processing for sure. But this was just definitely a good starting point and kind of showing us some of the things that we can change with post-processing. One that a lot of people are familiar with, but we can go into like the spatial domain kind of stuff and get into freaky deaky stuff. Yeah.
So for next week, or for the next time, we'll be continuing these discussions of digital imaging. I'm not sure what we've got up next, but we'll get it figured out, and we'll have it out there soon. And thank y'all so much for tuning in.
Yeah. Have an awesome day. Thank you.